A kind and gentle princess. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there lived a princess named Little Snow. She was not only beautiful but also kind-hearted and gentle. She had long, flowing black hair, rosy cheeks, and a smile as bright as the morning sun. But what made her special wasn't her beauty, it was her kindness. Little Snow loved animals, flowers, and everything in nature. She would spend hours in the royal gardens, talking to the birds, feeding the rabbits, and watching the butterflies dance in the air. She believed that all creatures, no matter how big or small, deserved love and care. But not everyone in the kingdom loved Little Snow. The queen, her stepmother, was a proud and jealous woman. She couldn't stand the fact that Little Snow was loved by everyone in the land. Every day, the queen would ask her magic mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And every day, the mirror would reply, "You are fair, my queen, but Little Snow is the fairest of them all." This made the queen furious. She couldn't bear to be second to Little Snow, and so she began to plot a way to get rid of her stepdaughter forever. The queen's wicked plan. One cold morning, the queen called her most trusted huntsman to the castle. She looked at him with her icy eyes and said, "Take Little Snow deep into the forest and make sure she never returns." The huntsman was shocked. Little Snow was kind and innocent. Why would the queen want to harm her? But he knew he couldn't disobey. If he refused, the queen would punish him instead. So, with a heavy heart, he led Little Snow into the forest. At first, Little Snow was excited. She loved the forest, with its towering trees and chirping birds. But as they walked deeper, she noticed the huntsman looking sad. "Is something wrong?" she asked gently. The huntsman sighed. He couldn't do it. He couldn't harm someone so pure-hearted. Instead, he knelt before her and said, "Run, princess. Run far away, and never return to the castle. The queen wants to harm you." Little Snow gasped, her heart pounding with fear. She didn't understand why her stepmother hated her so much, but she didn't have time to ask questions. She turned and ran, deeper and deeper into the forest, as fast as her legs could carry her. The trees whispered around her, the wind howled, and the shadows danced. But Little Snow did not stop running. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she had to get far away. Would she ever find a safe place to stay? The mysterious little cottage. After running for what felt like hours, Little Snow finally stumbled upon a small wooden cottage hidden among the trees. It looked warm and inviting, with tiny windows, a bright blue door, and smoke curling from the chimney. Curious but exhausted, she knocked on the door. No answer. Carefully, she pushed it open and stepped inside. What she saw made her eyes widen in surprise. Everything in the cottage was small. Tiny chairs, a tiny table, tiny beds, and even tiny plates with tiny spoons. It looked as if the house belonged to children or perhaps tiny creatures. Tired and hungry, Little Snow sat down at the table and saw a delicious meal already prepared. There were 7 small plates filled with fresh berries, warm bread, and honey. Her stomach rumbled. "I hope the owners won't mind," she whispered before taking a small bite. After eating, she explored the house and found 7 small beds lined up neatly. Yawning, she lay down on the largest one, curled up like a kitten, and fell into a deep sleep. Little did she know, the owners of the cottage were on their way home, and they were in for a big surprise. The 7 ducklings. As the sun began to set, the owners of the little cottage returned home from their long day of work. But these were no ordinary owners. They were 7 ducklings. Each one was unique in their own way. Quacky, Ducky, Feathers, Waddles, Puddle, Peep, and Fluffy. They were all brothers who lived happily in the forest. They worked together, gathering food and keeping their home tidy. But when they stepped inside their cottage, they noticed something was different. "Who ate our food?" Pete quacked, looking at his empty plate. "Who sat in my chair?" Waddles waddled over, inspecting the tiny chair with a dent in it. "And who is sleeping in our bed?" Fluffy whispered, pointing toward little Snow, who was still fast asleep. The ducklings huddled together, unsure of what to do. "Is she dangerous?" Ducky asked. "She looks peaceful," Feathers said. "Maybe she needs our help." At that moment, little Snow stirred and opened her eyes. She gasped when she saw the 7 little ducklings staring at her. Were they upset? Would they chase her away? But instead of being angry, the ducklings smiled warmly. "Hello there," Quacky said cheerfully. "Who are you?" And just like that, little Snow had found new friends. Would she finally be safe in the cottage of the 7 ducklings? The Queen's discovery. Days passed, and little Snow grew happier than ever. She helped the ducklings cook, clean, and even learned how to swim with them in the nearby pond. The forest became her home, and the ducklings became her family. But back in the castle, the Queen had not forgotten about little Snow. One morning, she stood before her magic mirror once again. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" She expected the mirror to say her name, but instead, it replied, "You are fair, my queen, it's true, but fairer still is one you knew." Deep in the woods, where trees grow tall, little Snow still shines above all. The queen's face twisted with rage. "She's still alive," she shrieked. Her hands curled into fists as she glared into the mirror. The huntsman had failed. If she wanted little Snow gone, she would have to do it herself. The queen paced back and forth, plotting her next move. She would disguise herself and go into the forest. This time, she would make sure little Snow never returned. And so, with a wicked grin, she picked up her darkest magic book and began preparing her most evil trick yet: the poisoned apple. The queen worked all night in her secret chamber, using her darkest magic to create a single, shiny red apple. But this was no ordinary apple. It was filled with a terrible sleeping curse. "One bite," the queen whispered, "and she will fall into an endless sleep." Disguising herself as an old, frail woman, the queen set off into the forest. She walked for hours until she finally reached the little cottage of the 7 ducklings. Little Snow was outside, hanging clothes to dry in the sun. When she saw the old woman approaching, she smiled kindly. "Hello, dear traveler. Are you lost?" The queen, pretending to be weak, leaned on her staff. "Oh, my sweet child," she croaked. "I was just passing through when I saw your lovely little home. I thought you might like a gift." She reached into her basket and pulled out the glowing red apple. "Here, take this. It's the finest apple you will ever taste." Little Snow hesitated. Something about the woman seemed strange, but before she could say anything, her stomach rumbled. The apple did look delicious. The queen smiled sweetly. "Go on, dear, just one bite." Little Snow took a small bite, and before she could even swallow, her vision blurred. The world spun around her, her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the ground. The queen cackled with triumph. Her plan had worked. Now, no magic mirror would ever call little Snow the fairest again. The ducklings' heartbreak. That evening, the 7 ducklings returned home from the pond, laughing and quacking as they waddled along. But when they reached their cottage, their laughter vanished. Little Snow lay on the ground, completely still. Her skin was pale, her lips frozen in silence. "Little Snow," Quacky cried, rushing to her side. The ducklings gathered around her, nudging her gently, but she didn't move. "She's sleeping?" Peep asked hopefully, but Feathers shook his head. "Something's wrong." The ducklings didn't know what to do. They tried everything to wake her up, shouting, tickling, even splashing water on her face, but nothing worked. Tears welled in their eyes. Had they failed to protect her? "We should never have left her alone," Puddle sniffled. The ducklings built a soft nest of flowers and leaves, where they placed little Snow, hoping she would wake up. But days passed, and she remained asleep. All they could do was stay by her side, keeping her safe, waiting, and hoping for a miracle. Would their beloved little Snow ever wake up? The prince's true heart. One bright morning, as the ducklings sat sadly by Little Snow's side, they heard the sound of hooves approaching. A young prince had been traveling through the forest when he saw the 7 ducklings gathered around someone. Curious, he stepped closer and gasped. "She's beautiful," he whispered. The ducklings looked up. "She's kind and gentle too," Quacky said sadly, "but she won't wake up." The prince's heart ached. Something about Little Snow made him feel as if they had met before, as if he had always known her. He couldn't bear to see her like this. He leaned down and gently kissed her forehead. Suddenly, Little Snow stirred. Her fingers twitched. Her eyes fluttered open. She took a deep breath and gasped. What happened? The ducklings cheered and quacked with joy. The prince smiled, offering his hand. "You were under a terrible curse, but your kind heart deserved to be saved." As Little Snow stood, she realized she was surrounded by love, by her loyal ducklings, her new friend, and the warmth of the forest. She wasn't alone. She was finally safe. And from that day on, Little Snow, the prince, and the 7 ducklings lived happily ever after. The end.